Hey everyone, it's Jamison Cable of the Land Between the Meadows Kentucky History Podcast. I just want to say thank you for your support and listening to this episode. For all the updates on our podcast and YouTube channel, youtube.com/Kentucky History Channel, like and follow us on Twitter and Facebook at KY History Pod. If you're enjoying the podcast, give us a good rating and review on Apple Podcasts or the podcast platform that you're listening to. If you're looking for ways to support the podcast, an easy and simple way is to share it on Facebook or any other social media and tell your friends. You can also go to audibletrial.com/KYHistoryPod and get a free book of your choice. And finally, you can visit patreon.com/KYHistoryPod if you want extra content from us. If you're already a patron, thank you for your support. It means so much to us. All the links I've mentioned are in the description of the podcast, so go check them out. Thanks again for listening. I hope you enjoy this episode. And remember, if it's not about Kentucky, it ain't worth a hill of beans.
In the pines, where the sun never shines, you'll shiver when the cold wind blows. There's a grave in the pines, where the sun never shines. There's a grave that's shaded with the pines.
Welcome back to the Land Between the Meadows, and thank you for listening to part 2 of our discussion on Agrarian Kentucky.
It would be remiss if we talk about Agrarian Kentucky and not talk about the grist mills that ground wheat and flour for Kentucky, and also the advent in 1817 of the steamboat that operated on the Kentucky River and the Ohio and the Mississippi and began to transport, because we got so many drunks, prostitute-laden Kentuckians that didn't find their way home, that the steamboat prevailed a little bit. They throw them on there drunk, and they'd get back up here. In 1817, the year before farms had yielded an income of $4,782,000, and that was by selling flour, we talked about wheat, whiskey, and of course tobacco, amounting for almost 3/4 of the total.
This is 1817.
1817.
Right? Yeah.
Hemp, cordage, and bagging yielded $500,000. Livestock, $300,000. Pork and bacon, another $350,000. And after 1815 and the introduction of the steamboat, Kentucky's farm trade gained tremendous momentum, as we said. No more got lost drunk going down the Natchez Trace. It's interesting. We haven't talked about Henry Clay.
No,
I think we're going to at some point. The pattern of Kentucky political, social, and economic life was cut to the lay of the land, and as we said, in the bluegrass, and there was no more eloquent a tribute to a man than Henry Clay. He's one of the acorns that broke out of the pot and saw things beyond the horizon. Definitely. And we're gonna talk about him. He wrote to a guy named Rodney Dennis on the 15th of April in 1849, and as a tribute to the bluegrass, this is one of the things that he said: "You do me too much honor in instituting any comparison between me and the renowned men of antiquity. I am in one respect better off than Moses. He died in sight of, without reaching, the promised land. I occupy as good a farm as any that he would have found if he had reached it, and it has been acquired not by heredity, descent, but by my own labor."
He's talking about Kentucky.
He's talking about Kentucky. He's talking about his farm in Lexington, or on the outskirts of Lexington, that they called it the Promised Land. That there's no better place. Kentucky, as we said before, that area where there were game trails from Buffalo, huge highways. I think in my mind they're as wide as I-75 going north and south, that plowed through the cane brakes and went from grazing pastures to salt licks. It was a premonition. It was a premonition of things to come, because Kentucky became, as a western state, leading area, if not state, in the production of livestock and quality livestock. And basically, one of the things that happened was there were several people that introduced the milking shorthorn cow. And the Shakers at Pleasant Hill and up in Union, Ohio, not South Union, but Union, Ohio, Shaker communities began breeding milking shorthorns, because most people were subsistence farming. They had a couple of cows They would have a sow, a couple of sows, and a boar that they would use when they came across the mountains. Not too many had sheep. They had horses, and the first horses that were introduced in Kentucky, when Daniel Boone was in here trapping, there's mention of him using horses. They used them as pack horses to get furs out. So horses became draft animals, were very important. And also, early on, mules. Kentucky became one of the favorite areas for advancing mules, and mules were very expensive in developing them. The milking shorthorn became really popular because the Shakers began breeding it with the first Hereford bulls that they had actually, some people in Kentucky had ordered from England, the top bulls of the area. And they bred them with the milking shorthorn to start a new American breed called the beef shorthorn. And the early people in settlements called them strawberry shorthorns. Strawberry shorthorns were to become the beef shorthorn breed. So you had the milking shorthorns, which were dairy cattle, and then you had the dual purpose shorthorns, which they called strawberry cows or strawberry shorthorns, and they were beef. And for the frontier, you could have that if it had a bull calf, it would be beefy and could provide beef, and if it was a female, you could milk it and it would have plenty of milk. So they became very instrumental in developing that and became very popular. And the very early herds of cattle in Kentucky became really popular. Early, and particularly in the bluegrass, where these farms were, livestock became very important. And people were very proud of their pigs and sheep and cattle and horses. And it became very prominent in many of these great big antebellum estate homes and so forth, or just the common yeoman, if he had such livestock, he would have paintings made of them. And he would, and there was a famous painter named Troyes, Troyes, and I'd love to have an original, if there any of you out there got one, of Kentucky livestock. And for about $30, he would paint a painting of your favorite farm animal, and it was a custom in the living room, along with paintings of your children, to have a painting of your livestock. They had such pride of that. And I found that really interesting.
So come gather around, kids. Let's get a painting of of
a hog.
Hog.
Yeah, a hog or a good bull or a cow and so forth that were done.
So when these cows, so you said that these cows were originally bred in Union, Ohio?
The Union Shaker Village.
Yes.
It's Lebanon, Ohio.
Oh, it's Lebanon,
Ohio.
Union. Oh, okay.
Just like Shakertown's called Pleasant Hill.
And then those
in Mercer County.
Those breeds became popular in Kentucky.
Yes, they bred and sold them to pioneers. That's right. In Clark County, James Gray brought in a Virginia-bred English bull named Pluto in 1803. And west of the mountains, he was bred to some of the better cows in the area. In humble imitation, the rugged old pioneers Simon Kent and Pluto in time was moved to Ohio on the advancing frontier, just like Simon Kenton did. Where he again spread fame and grade production of cattle. Another shorthorn was in Fayette County, was imported by a Miller-bred bull called Buzzard in 1810. And this animal was also, along with the famous Shaker, helped the farmers of Pleasant Hill and Union Village in Ohio, as we talked about, to establish a fine reputation as breeders of quality livestock. And that's kind of interesting to think about because, you think about Shakers and their religion. I mean, they were Christian people that wanted to do good for the world. And one of the ways were to raise seeds and vegetable crops and food in excess of their village, their community, to sell to people of the world. They made herbs and medicine that were, ravaged during the Civil War, as both the North and the South went through. And this quality, they bred hogs and cattle and sold them to people that were going west on the frontier so they'd have quality livestock. And they were known for this, and people gathered around trying to get this. So in central Kentucky, former pasture lands were made and expanded in what were cane breaks. So cane breaks were cut down and pastures were made. And just like the great buffalo and so forth, the limestone soils helped to create high-quality livestock. And these were like virgin pastures. We're upgrading the animals that graze them. And the cattle industry for decades of the 19th century was impressive, not only when measured in objective cash returns, but also since it became highly cherished symbol of Kentuckian agricultural and agrarian civilization. These animals were shipped all over the United States. They were brought in. Henry Clay, entered the British cattle market on his return from the Treaty of Ghent. He stopped in London and the cattle show and bought some Hereford cattle and brought in the first Hereford cattle, which we said were bred with Shorthorn and so forth. And he brought actually 11 cattle in his paradise we talked about at Ashland, that's his home, Henry Clay, from England, and it helped Lexington greatly to advance the cattle breeding in Kentucky. So you've got names of cattle bloods that were prominent: Lady Mundy, Lady Kate, Lafayette, Napoleon, Ambassador, Lady Durham, Stonehammer, and the Royal Red Lady One Teat.
These are names of
These
the
are
cattle?
names of the cattle that Henry Clay and some of them, they had names, and they were very, very, very important to Kentuckians. Then Kentuckians had, they didn't have stockyards when they started doing large groups of cattle, and they brought in sheep as well and so forth. And they had people, I think they called them hustlers or hucklers, that sold livestock, and they would go around buying them from farm and running them up and down the roads, selling them before they started pinning them up.
So kind of a mobile stockyard.
Mobile stockyard, that's right. And they had some of the first livestock shows. I believe they were in Clark County, and they really hit a big theme in Kentucky. We talked about William Whitley in the War of 1812 in one of our recent podcasts, and Harley had been the last gun fired in the War of 1812. Then a man named Lewis Sanders, north of Lexington, and they called it the Lewis Sanders Garden of Sandersville, decided to have a livestock fair, which was the first one in Kentucky. And he was kind of an ingenious farmer and was applying knowledge he had gleaned from English farm journals that he'd been reading as how to raise livestock. And he was highly successful. And he sent a special enticement to local breeders to exhibit their animals and announced that silver julep cups, they cost $15 each, that were coin silver, hammered by Lexington coin silversmith, would be some of the prize marks for the most prestigious animals at his fair. And this became very popular, and his show became very popular, and farmers began to, it wasn't just raising cattle, it was quality. And there were people that boasted that came to some of his shows. There was a boar, you talk about the names, one of them was called Calcutta, was awarded a julep cup, a hog. But some of the cattle and horses and so forth, and they were finest, and it began to become attention. And some English people that came here that had shows in Europe said that the bluegrass around Lexington and Sanders livestock exhibitions were the finest livestock to be found in the world through this breeding program. Well, so it wasn't just haphazard. They were really creating great animals.
Well, it's interesting to me whenever I think of this time period. You said that Sanders was studying English journals.
Yes.
I don't think it's hard for me to fathom, I guess, but it's just me not thinking about it, that somebody in the 1812, 1830 is studying about how to raise cattle. Right. And in my mind, I'm thinking, well, they're still working on just how to survive.
Right.
But yet, you look at where they were coming from, and he was able to get stuff from Europe that he wanted to raise good bulls or good cows and good livestock. And he did. It's just interesting to think that over time that we get deluded, is that right?
Yes.
Of maybe the past, to think that they were so much more barbaric.
These
or whatever.
Sophisticated big men. This is the background to the bluegrass aristocracy. That's what's forming here. With horses and cattle and hogs and sheep and so forth.
Horse racing.
And horse racing and everything else. And, you can see it coming from Sportsman's Hill. We've seen parts of the historical puzzle we talked about. Also, you had shared with me earlier that your interest in Henry Clay and some of the exciting things that happen over at Ashland, and encouraging people to go over there and see it. At one of his shows, they advertised a debate that Henry Clay not only had some of his livestock in the show, but he debated a man named John Pope when he was running for Congress, one of my relatives. And John Pope was running. Clay confronted him in a debate on the issue of his having favored raising the pay for congressmen. And Clay, who was big, was wealthy and had livestock, was saying that congressmen didn't need the common man's tax money, which is here we go, Kentucky. Very much so. So he could explain to an influential assemblage of Kentucky farmers reasons for his actions and reasons to elect him, Clay, to Pope. And they described Pope as a forceful Pope. That he was really, when he debated, he was really strong and powerful and organized. But he was also a controversial figure in the War of 1812. But Clay debated him at one of these shows, and they said it was just a fantastic thing. That people went and saw animals. They heard a great political debate between these two men, and they gave out Kentucky distilled whiskey.
Surprise!
And people brought their finest food to share on the grounds like a picnic. And it was just a good party.
Well, I was thinking, this is entertainment. I mean,
it really was.
What else are they? They don't have their video games or anything, or TV or anything like that. They're going here to be entertained and see all the animals.
These proud Kentucky farmers from the bluegrass came to Fowler's Garden, which was a name for a farm, dressed in their finest clothes. The ladies were. They brought with them ample supplies of their expert cooking, their country hams and so forth. Loaded baskets they brought were said to contain prime beef, baked ham, there you go, fried chicken, Colonel Saunders, legs of lamb, and stacks of pies and cakes, stacks of them for everybody to eat. So this was the very beginning of the Kentucky State Fair.
There you go.
This was
laying the groundwork.
Laying the groundwork exactly for the Kentucky State Fair, and so this became the aura, the attitude, the fun that went with the fair, the sharing, the pride of livestock, judging contests and so forth, of animal fruits. Vegetables, it expanded into that. Crafts, art, all that was associated because of this fair that they had and the political debate between Clay and Pope.
Back in 1818.
There were others, and in 1837, another blooded stock fair show, they called them. We presume the world never exhibited finer lots of horses, cows, jacks, and sheep or hogs. And we saw the cattle, and the sight of them was really something. We'd say that nowhere else in the world was there any exhibit that matches the ones in Kentucky for blooded livestock. So, and they you know what they said? They said that part of this was related to the soil. Let's go back to what we're talking about. They were saying that Kentucky has all these fine animals, not just because the farmers knew how to grow them in agrarian Kentucky, but because of the soil, the limestone soils, which leached calcium, which made strong bones, and the technology from Tidewater, Virginia to the best livestock in Europe were brought in here. Now, I also had seen a reference that where did all these cattle come from? There was an equal amount that came down on flatboats from Pennsylvania, came that way on the Ohio River. They said some of the flatboats that carried livestock, hogs and cattle, if you can just picture this in your mind, were on flatboats that were pegged and nailed together with hemp rope and so forth. And the logs, some of them were 60 feet long that held the livestock. And they said an equal amount came through the Wilderness Road. And that's where I was teasing that, probably hogs rooted the road up as much as Daniel Boone hooked the dead bushes along the Rockcastle River. So I found that pretty interesting too. It's also noted, to give you the volume of this, that there were one group of people that brought 500 cattle over the Wilderness Road, 500 at a time. That's a lot. Pouring into central Kentucky. They were moving their herds from Virginia because they had heard of this. And they were camped along the Kentucky River in the spring, and a flood came and drowned all 500 cattle.
Oh, man.
Yes.
That's devastating.
That is devastating. That really is. Instead, we talk about livestock sales today. In 1974, field crops yielded $918 million in Kentucky, and livestock sales were $669 million. That was in 74.
Well, Mr. Pope, I think we might want to cut this one off right here. We are getting a little lengthy with our Kentuckians sailing down the river and down to New Orleans with their prostitutes.
I got one more thing to say, but I'm not through yet. Let me at him.
But anyway,
we were talking, Jameson, about Henry Clay, and about how he with the Shorthorn and the Herefords he brought over from England, and how he went to some of these fairs. And even I've never heard anyone give credit to him for helping to start the Kentucky States Fair. But Ashland, the home of Henry Clay, are just fantastic.
It is.
Of all the statesmen in Kentucky, he's certainly right at the top.
Yeah.
He's really interesting. Another thing that has really shaped my life and my times teaching, the most enjoyable moments, which I'd shared with you years ago and which we developed, was going to Pine Mountain Settlement School.
Yes.
Pine Mountain Settlement School is awesome.
It is.
Up in Harlan County. The kids came away from that with some of the most renewed, talk about Kentucky.
Oh, yeah.
Feeling for Kentucky. The best part of Kentucky. Its natural resources, its land, and the skills and the history they even taught there. And their fauna and flora, their knowledge of plants and animals. I know in the spring they have a wildlife walk that's very popular. It's often sold out. People come from all over the country
to see it.
The
geography, just the layout, everything.
Breathtaking.
It is.
And the people up there are really special.
They are nice.
I talked about simplicity, but there is beauty in simplicity, and there's ugliness sometimes in complexity.
That's right.
That's right.
Well,
we'll end with that.
We will end
Try
with that.
Try to say something good.
Keep listening. If you want to connect to us via Twitter, we have a Twitter now at KY History Pod. You can also email us at thelandbetweenthemeadows@gmail.com and find us on Facebook.
And if you raise cattle, raise Shorthorn.
There you go.
In Kentucky.
Yeah. And see, asking back naming strawberry, right?
That's right. Strawberry roans. Or good polled Herefords would be good.
With all that being said, thanks again for listening.
Wink, wink.
See ya.